So let me just kick off formally and say Honourable Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Mr. Buti Manamela, who will join us soon, Director General of the Department of Science and Innovation, Dr. Phil Mujwaga, senior representatives from foreign embassies and consulates in South Africa, Rector and Vice-Chancellor of Stellenbosch University, Professor Wim de Villiers, and other Vice-Chancellors and senior managers of universities across South Africa, senior representatives from external stakeholder organizations, members of the press, honored guests. All protocols observed. Good afternoon, my name is Terina Teron, and I will be your program director for this event. It is my absolute pleasure and privilege to welcome you to this online launch of the new School for Climate Studies at Stellenbosch University. Of course, we would have very dearly liked to celebrate this event in person with you against the backdrop of the beautiful Stellenbosch winelands and now snow-capped mountains, but as you know, this is not possible right now. And we are equally grateful for the technology enabling us to welcome you to Stellenbosch virtually in order for us to celebrate this seminal launch. This is an incredibly important event for Stellenbosch University, as the establishment of the school promises to be a groundbreaking initiative in the battle against climate change. It will bring together transdisciplinary capacity to combine the climate-related knowledge systems of Stellenbosch University's 10 faculties, the public sector's climate policies and initiatives, the private sector's climate redress and innovation capacities, and the social impact mission of Stellenbosch University, both in academic and applied ways, all in support of the transition to a climate-resilient society and low-carbon economy. So the establishment of the school really consolidates existing and build new capacity and collaborations in order to ensure a coordinated response to climate change through new partnerships that cross disciplinary, institutional, national, and international boundaries. So throughout today's program, you will hear about the importance of this initiative for the university, the country, and globally. And I really hope that after this event, you will feel as excited and inspired as we do, that this truly represents an effort to tackle the climate crisis with the same level of urgency and collaboration that scientists, the public and private entities, and governments are currently tackling the COVID-19 pandemic with.
So thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. And colleagues, it's really great having all of you be present at this launch, albeit virtual, and we really thank you for your support of Stellenbosch University School for Climate Studies. Listening to the introduction and the wonderful music from our university choir actually reminds me about how much I miss seeing all of you face to face, and I also miss seeing our university choir face to face. And I really encourage you to look them up on the web and listen to them. They are really, truly astounding. So, and I'm hopeful that we can get the Deputy Minister online, and I really want to thank him in advance for his words, because it is absolutely true that all sectors, public and private, must work together to tackle climate change. So contextualizing the need for research on climate within the framework of our institution of Stellenbosch University's Vision 2040 is really not a difficult task. Our Vision 2040 by its very definition aims to gaze into the future, but actually all future scenarios we can possibly imagine may actually be moot if climate studies and climate change, if that's not at the top of our agendas. And I want to echo the words of former American President Barack Obama. Climate change is no longer some far off problem. It is happening here, and it is happening now. So when he spoke those words, he was merely following the lead of the world's leading scientists, and all reliable sources point to the fact that climate warming trends over the past century are very, very likely due to human activities. In addition, most of the leading scientific organizations worldwide have issued public statements endorsing this position. So, as a leading research institution on our continent, our next logical step would be and is for scientists and researchers at Stellenbosch University to add their voices and expertise to this very important field of study, and for more scientists to join our ranks. And in our vision statement, we affirm that we want to be Africa's leading research-intensive university, globally recognized as excellent, inclusive, and innovative, where we advance knowledge in service of society. And absolutely, establishing this School for Climate Studies is a very urgent and necessary such service to society. Now, it may be, sometimes it seems that we as South Africans and Africans often tend to revert back to the notion that it's only the major economies of the world that are the big offenders when it comes to our warming planet. But actually, as a major contributor to the emission of greenhouse gases on the African continent, South Africa can't just sit back and wash its hands of this mounting humanitarian and environmental crisis. And the School for Climate Studies, together with collaborating partners from all over the world, will have the capacity to contribute significantly to research and solutions in fighting climate change. Now, what's the core activities of the school going to be? It's going to be research and development, learning and teaching, collaboration, capacity building and consultancy, and commercialization and social impact. And all of these align perfectly with Stellenbosch University's vision and core strategic themes. And any institutional vision such as ours that embraces values like excellence, compassion, equity, respect, and accountability, and that does not invest in climate research, is sure to run into a moral conundrum in the near future. And through research that has the potential to have a real-world impact, we can avoid many of the doomsday scenarios that could possibly play out in the future and has actually already started affecting some parts of the world today. So, to all my colleagues and everyone involved in the establishment of the School for Climate Studies, I wish you the best of luck for your important work. We need your expertise more than ever. And a final reason why I'm very excited by this development speaks to a higher goal in a sense. It's like the School for Data Science and Computational Thinking that we launched in 2019. This School for Climate Studies will have a broad mandate to work across all faculties, centers, and institutes at Stellenbosch University, as well as with other national and international higher education institutions and public and private enterprises. Because that's the way we need to go in order to disrupt these silos that often stand in the way of us addressing these complex issues and problems that Jim Collins has called the big, hairy, audacious goals that we need to set ourselves in solving. And I must say, if beating climate change is not such a big, hairy, audacious goal, I don't know what is. And I think that multi and inter and transdisciplinary collaboration is absolutely crucial. So let's move forward together. Thank you very much, Terina.
Thank you very much, Professor de Villiers. I think we all know that your leadership and the fact that you are championing this initiative at the highest level in the university is also a critical element in the success. So we are really looking forward to moving together on this one. I've gotten the message that we now have the Honourable Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology in the room, Mr. Buti Manamela. Mr. Manamela, we are extremely privileged to welcome you with us. Apologies for the slight shift in the program and for the technical difficulties, but we are very much looking forward to hearing from you. And without any further ado, I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's the new world that we live in, that we get all these technology glitches. But thank you for the welcome. Let me extend my greetings, Program Director, to the Vice Chancellor, Professor de Villiers, also to the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Postgraduate Studies, Professor Eugene Kloot, also Professor Guy Mishley, all distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'd really want to thank you for having invited the minister, whom I am standing in for, on this very important occasion, which is the launch of the School of Climate Studies. I suppose very few in the world, very few universities in the world and institutions of learning have such an initiative. And if they do, I think it's an opportunity for us to look into further collaboration with those. And there's no doubt that natural climate variability and human-caused climate changes are interacting to pose significant social and economic challenges, even for the richest and most developed nations on earth. There is general agreement that in Southern Africa, we urgently need expertise, knowledge, and innovation to better understand and adapt to the complex results of worsening climate events. This knowledge is also needed to support our negotiators in international multilateral conventions to ensure that our interests are well represented and supported by a credible evidence base. As you may be aware, the recent report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change emphasized the need for a new generation of scientists who are not only experts in their fields, but also able to think across multiple disciplines in order to identify synergies and innovative solutions to climate change. We now know with greater clarity that our economies and ecological systems are increasingly codependent and interacting, and that human ingenuity is infinite, but natural resources are finite. Therefore, human ingenuity is needed more than ever to allow for vibrant human scientists that can develop sustainably within a finite resource landscape. In this respect, the university environment is a space where new synergies between technology and fundamental science can be explored safely and creatively, translated from theory into practical implementation. These efforts are what will create new areas of sustainable, inclusive, and equitable economic growth for South Africa and the region as a whole. Additional to this, we also see this school adding to the existing excellence and pool of training centers for what is increasingly becoming a topical subject, which is climate change, and the negative impact it has on the economy and society. Focused studies in climate is a positive step towards giving special attention to climate change, a move from dealing with the subject under the traditional umbrella of environmental studies or science. The direct benefits of this focused approach is potential to new knowledge generation, new generation of well-trained climate scientists and students, as well as increased research outputs, including scientific evidence to support policy development, planning, and general decision-making. Because of its location at the southern tip of Africa and being surrounded by 3 oceans that influence the Southern African climate system, South Africa is a preferred destination for international climate-related research and well-positioned to lead such research effort. In the last decade, we have seen a steady increase of South African scientists participating in strategic international climate-related research programs and conventions. These include the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Changes Technical Working Groups. It also includes subsidiary bodies such as the Body on Scientific and Technological Advance, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, and Group on Earth Observations, Biodiversity Observation Network, or GEOBON. This does not only confirm our country's high ranking globally in terms of research outputs, but also suggests that South Africa contributes significantly to global science program. Furthermore, we see our recently established Presidential Commission on Climate Change and National COVID-19 Coordination benefiting greatly from the wealth of data and scientific evidence coming from an increased pool of institutions undertaking climate research and studies, and its actions and decisions will be on a sound scientific base. From a policy point of view, our Global Change Grand Challenge under the Department of Science and Innovation, which our DG, who is here, is leading it quite diligently. The 10-year innovation plan has a strong focus on climate change based on IPCC's vulnerability indices, which show Southern Africa is one of the most vulnerable regions to climate change and variability. In our view, therefore, the school we are launching here today will give impetus to this focus on climate change and increase landscape of institutions providing such specialized training and capabilities which the country needs to deal with negative impacts of climate change and develop necessary adaptation mechanisms. As you can imagine, the development of appropriate skills is key to our country's climate change response measures and in line with the key objectives of, amongst others, our National Climate Change Response Policy, our new white paper on science, technology, and innovation, which I referred to much earlier. The focus on skills development is also linked to our key national strategic goals as articulated in our National Development Plan, that of the need for South Africa to become a responsible, responsive, and capable developmental state. We also see the skill sets that will be developed at this school as increasing the overall pool of climate scientists and practitioners. One of the key aspects of climate training, which is likely to be part of the school's modules, is the ability to model and predict weather and climate patterns and be able to develop projections and advanced warnings. As you know, areas such as climate projection require predictive tools, mainly mathematical algorithms, and adaptation of such tools for local conditions. Other sectors that are likely to benefit from improved climate understanding and impact thereof include housing, water, and infrastructure for basic services. This, ladies and gentlemen, are just some of the many short and long-term benefits that we think our country will derive from the launch of this very crucial school. Conclusion, the launch of this school underscores the importance of understanding the environmental as well as socio-economic impacts of climate change, variability, and adequately equipping the country to effectively respond to the challenges posed by this phenomena. Related to this is the fact that South Africa stands to benefit intellectually from expanded climate knowledge base with more institutions offering specialized climate studies. As stated, the other benefit is that South Africa will be empowered to play a more increased role in global initiatives, including negotiations at conventions and treaties. As a country, we're likely to see improved decision-making and planning as a result of more institutions providing training and academic qualifications in climate-related studies. These biggest beneficiaries in this regard, including our national government and its entities, municipalities, farmers, health practitioners, the private sector, and civil society organizations. There is no doubt, therefore, that this school constitutes a first on the African continent, and we're confident that it will produce groundbreaking insight. I'd really want to take this opportunity to congratulate Stellenbosch University on this very important visionary step. It is now my singular honor to, on behalf of the Minister, declare the School of Climate Studies open. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Deputy Minister Buti Manamela. We appreciate your department's support of the school and your endorsement of the school greatly. We appreciate your presence here today. As always, you've done an absolutely sterling job of standing in for the Honourable Minister, Bladen Zimandi, on rather short notice. We really appreciate that, and we would like you to also convey our gratitude to the Honourable Minister for your department's continued support. And while you were talking, I was reminded of the well-known African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And certainly we want to go far, and we would be willing from our side to take hands with external stakeholders, and we really appreciate the support that your department offers us in this regard. We all know that with an establishment of a new entity like the school, a lot of things can be done by top management, by external stakeholders. But if we don't have the academics on the ground enthusiastically participating and buying into this, then we would be lost in the water to start with. So at Stellenbosch University, we are extremely privileged to have an inspired group of academic staff members who are buying into this enthusiastically, who has been leading this establishment of the school and really, really participating and making things happen on the ground. And for them, the real work is only just starting now with consolidating and coordinating Stellenbosch University's climate change response, and also to create new initiatives and new partnerships to take the school forward. One of the leading people, academics in this venture has been Professor Guy Midgley. Guy, I'm very grateful for you and that you are willing to address us today. Professor Midgley is an internationally acknowledged leader in the field of biodiversity and global change science. And Guy, without further ado, I'm going to give over to you to address us on the global challenge of climate change.
Thanks very much, Program Director. What do I do? Do I switch my video on?
You can switch your video on, and I'm not sure if Mareike will share your slides or if you're going to share some slides.
I'm going to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Is that done?
Yes, we can see it. Thanks, Guy.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you, Deputy Minister, for those words. I think they were very insightful and encouraging, and to Prof. de Villiers as well, very exciting and encouraging words. Welcome, dignitaries, guests, and thank you very much for this opportunity for me to talk to you about the climate crisis. You'll notice that I've adjusted the title slightly and increased, try to increase an interest to some extent. The climate crisis, the word crisis really is, I think, an important one to use. There's nothing like a crisis to generate action, to generate responses. And it's a time of both risk and opportunity. And I think this is really where the school comes in. Can we identify the risks properly? And can we make use of the opportunities? And how best do we go about doing that? So I'm going to look at this from a number of different perspectives, try to maintain your interest as much as possible, and start really from the perspective of some hard-nosed economists, the economists of the World Economic Forum. I'm going back here a couple of years to a report that they produced in 2018, which looked at the major risks to the global economy. And you'll see here the likelihood and impact of these events that they are worried about. And in the top right quadrant here are the most important risks. So the risk is given by the combination of impact and likelihood. So let's go and zoom in on these risks. I think this is a really good place to start. Zooming in on this top right quadrant, the highest risks, and what this august body has decided in 2018 was that some of the biggest risks were likely to be extreme weather events, natural disasters, water crises, the failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation, food crises, and things like large-scale involuntary migration. And for those of us who've been working in the space for some time, it's very obvious that these are all elements, all facets of the same problem. These are all facets of an overuse of the environment. So we need to look at this holistically if we want to solve it. And if we can get this right, we really are able to address a wide range of the top-rated disasters that have been identified by this body. What is a good way to look at this? I think this is quite an interesting way to look at things. And it's really about how do we, as a species, how do we integrate two very, very complex systems? An ecological system, or more and more an agroecological system, with an economic system. And I like to look at it this way because you can think about how these systems have evolved and where they've come from. The ecological system on our planet is hundreds of millions of years old. It's infinitely creative. It has been able to convert fundamental resources of sunlight, water, carbon, nutrients into complex biological systems, from which we're born. So this is an ancient system. It's very, very complex. It's resilient, and it has infinite creativity. And on the other hand, the economic system is probably only a few thousand years old. It's entirely our invention. And it's quite extraordinary that despite the novelty and the newness of this system and the fact that we invented it, how poorly we were able to predict it. In a way, we were able to predict the climate crisis far more effectively than economists have been able to predict economic crises. So I say that as a bit of a provocative statement. But for some reason, we give priority to the economic system. We feel that there's a common thought idea that human well-being lies in economic well-being, and thus the economic system in the world gets priority. And this has led to, in some senses, the strip mining of the world's ecological system to support the economic system, because it's beneficial to people. But in fact, people are part of the living system. We eat food and we drink water, so we belong here. And we should reset the balance between these two systems. We've got to find a better way of allowing feedback information from our economic system to better inform risks going forward. And I think it's very interesting that the climate crisis is one crisis which has really highlighted how important our ecological system is. And the way I want to illustrate this quantitatively is by using the very famous work of William Nordhaus, who received a Nobel Prize for his economic analysis of the social cost of carbon. Basically, what this work has done, Terina warned you, I'm an academic, so I'll try to make this as accessible as possible. But what Nordhaus did was to calculate what is the cost to the economy of every additional ton of CO2 that is emitted. And what you see is that the estimated cost has been rising substantially over the last few years and decades. So if we go back to the 2013 version of Nordhaus's work and earlier work, we find that the calculated social cost of carbon was about $17 a ton. But more recently, this has been revised with new work, and we see that the social cost of carbon has almost doubled. What has changed? What has really changed is that the effective nature, the support of the ecological system in offsetting climate damages has been incorporated into the new social cost of carbon. So this is one of the biggest changes to this estimate was the result of incorporating more correctly the response of the world's ecosystems to the climate crisis. And that, I think, is a really, really good illustration of the growing realization that we need to deal with this problem holistically and get this balance right. Where does this really come from? What's the evidence that this is so important? So let's remember this is a $31 a ton now is the estimate of the social cost of carbon. Well, it comes from our better and better and more exquisite understanding of the way that the planet's carbon cycle responds to our emissions. And this looks complicated to start off with, but it's really quite simple. Before we started burning fossil fuels, we had a certain amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and it's measured in parts per million. We had just under 300 parts per million in the atmosphere around us. Today, we have, well, it's a little bit higher than now. This is in 2014. It's over 410 now. We've got about 400 ppm, let's say, for the sake of argument. So we've increased the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere by this much, but in fact, we've emitted much more CO2 than has emerged in the atmosphere. We've emitted the equivalent of over 250 parts per million. Where has it gone? Only part of it has emerged in the atmosphere. More than half of it has been taken up by our land ecological systems and into the ocean. The ocean sink results in acidification of the oceans, which is a negative thing. But about 75 billion tons of CO2 has gone onto the land. Actually, I realized you can multiply that up by the social cost of carbon, and I think you get a value of $2.2 trillion. So that's the realization that's increasingly coming into these calculations, the need to manage systems holistically and get a better balance between economics and the way that the world really works. This has really been brought home to us recently now, and I don't think this is news to anybody, in the impact of extreme events that are increasingly being felt around the world. And indeed, in the 1990s, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change produced this sort of graphic, which tried to warn the world of what was to come. And what they said was that if you look at the probability of occurrence, the likelihood of climate events, there is a normal distribution. You normally expect the climate to be operating around some kind of average, but every now and then we get extreme cold and extreme warm events. We live in, all of us experience this. Very, very hot days, very, very cold days, and a lot of days close to normal. But with climate change, what was predicted was that as the average temperature were to increase, it greatly increases the chance of exceeding these high intensity, of increasing the frequency of these high intensity events relative to what we did experience. Now that was the warning made in the 80s and 90s, and we now see that has come to pass. Indeed, it's frustrating. The developed world is now feeling these effects, but the developing world for years has been seeing increasing impacts of extreme events, but have been their cries have not really been making enough of an impact. But it's going to be interesting to see now, with the richer countries of the world seeing big events like this, what is to come. And this again is an opportunity. This is game changing. Where do the responses get negotiated and decided upon? Well, we have international agreements that most countries have signed up to, the conventions, the biological diversity, and importantly, the climate change convention. And in these hallowed halls, intense negotiations take place, and countries send their representatives with their positions to try to come to solutions and to hammer out solutions. And it's a very, very complicated space. And the results of these discussions have really changed things to a large extent. Many people may say not much has changed, but in fact, there has been very, very significant shifts in how things could evolve and have evolved. And I want to show you just how complicated this is and how this has affected us, affected the global economy. And I will do this through this graph here, which is an extremely interesting one produced by the Global Carbon Project, which does amazing work in understanding the greenhouse gas emissions on our planet. We understand this extremely well now, and allocating these emissions to different countries. And this graph does something extremely interesting. What it does is it allocates emissions from to production, in other words, economic or industrial activity, and to consumption, what is being consumed in the country. And this illustrates something very, very important. A couple of things, actually. Firstly, the growth in China's emissions were really the basis of this growth was set during the 90s with the change in the Chinese economic system, and this enormous growth in emissions, which has really added a lot to the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. But what we see is that their consumption is far less than their production. So, but at the same time, the European Union, the US, while they've been keeping their emissions relatively constant and on a downward trend, basically exported their emissions to industrial China. So this is a result of one of the results of these complicated discussions. So this is complex. There are many other complexities which are very relevant to Southern Africa. Of course, we can't afford, Africa could not afford, the world could not afford Africa to go on a development pathway that China went on. So another, I want to highlight another complex issue which seems so simple on the face of it, but turns out to be risky for Southern Africa. And that is the idea that we could plant millions of trees and use the ecosystem in this way to save carbon, to reduce emissions. And on the face of it, if you run certain calculations, it looks very, very promising. And you find that in parts of Southern Africa, if we planted lots and lots of trees, we could potentially store lots of carbon. But this is hugely risky for us in this part of the world. And work that we've been doing has found that these areas where reforestation or afforestation is planned are home to some of our richest ecosystems. And the risks are enormous. If companies and incentives are made for people to afforest these systems, we stand to lose biodiversity, we stand to lose ecosystem services. Human livelihoods will be affected for decades to come. And this is a really important reason why we need endemic indigenous African science that helps to protect us against these sorts of ideas and policies that may emanate from richer nations. It's extremely important. If you look at some of the systems that have been identified for afforestation, so-called degraded grasslands, potentially these grasslands can carry forests. We know that because we can plant pine trees in them, but they're not afforested systems. These are our water towers of the Drakensberg, for example. And we sorely need to resist this sort of pressure to plant trees on some of our most diverse and incredible ecosystems. Tarina, how am I doing for time? I actually I didn't see when I started.
You can go ahead, Guy. I think we're still very much within our time limits.
That's great. Good. I can get a bit carried away sometimes, so I've just got to watch it. I want to move, having looked at the policy side and the risks and the opportunities there, I want to talk a little bit about the scientific opportunity that is on offer with a school for climate studies. And you know, we need to remember where we are. We're embedded in the western part of southwestern Southern Africa, in this part of the world. It's one of the most challenging and extraordinary places to study science, to study climate. And for many, many reasons. One is access into the Southern Ocean, one of the most productive oceans on the planet, dynamic, complex, very, very important in climate regulation. These chlorophyll-rich waters absorb CO2 and are an important way in which the oceans regulate atmospheric CO2 concentrations. It's filled with very complex gradients which link in with climatic systems. We have very rich upwelling systems which fund various fishing industries, and complicated climatic gradients across the country from west to east, winter rainfall to summer rainfall gradients, and a tropical temperate to tropical temperature gradient. So fantastic place to study climate and how climate affects society. And this is one of the main reasons behind the Global Change Grand Challenge of the National Research Foundation, which has funded some excellent work, and we've trained many hundreds of students in this space. And I think students that will go on to provide a lot of technical expertise for countries in this region to understand the risks and the opportunities. Another thing that we need to remember is being at Stellenbosch in the western part of Southern Africa, we are in a unique climatic type. We're in a Mediterranean climate. It's the rarest climate type on the face of the planet. These little red areas here are areas of the world with Mediterranean type climates. Some of the richest economies in the world are found in these sorts of climates. Some of the oldest civilizations emerge from Mediterranean type climates, and even big ideas like democracy emerged out of a Mediterranean type climate. Why is that? It's possible that one of the reasons is that Mediterranean type climates have got very reliable winter rainfall. So their rainfall patterns are remarkably reliable because they're situated in the zone of the westerlies, which bring winter rainfall, both in the northern and southern hemisphere. And is this not one of the reasons why this particular kind of climate is so productive? And I think it's an interesting question. It's a good reason why we need to study climate, and not just climate change. We need to understand the role of climate and the evolution of climate in how societies have evolved. But the winter rainfall climates, unfortunately, have a unique vulnerability to climate change. And this we've all experienced here, those of us who live in the Cape Town region. And the reason is that with global warming, one of the most well-predicted effects is a southerly movement of these rain-bearing westerly frontal systems. And that has been seen in the paleo record in over centuries, over millennia. The position of these westerlies moves in response to the global climate. And the upshot is that one of the most reliable predictions for rainfall change is of a reduction in rainfall in these Mediterranean ecosystems, these very, very rich ecosystems. And that, I think, is an incredibly important reason for us to prioritize the Mediterranean systems. They're scattered throughout the world. They're very rich economies. And is this also not a big opportunity for combining forces to understand these incredible systems? One of the big opportunities that we've seen in the Western Cape is how to best manage our ecosystems for water yield to mitigate or to adapt to the effect of climate change. And one thing that we've seen is the planting of exotic trees in our catchments has led to their escape. This is a form of environmental pollution, actually. Slow motion pollution event of invasive alien trees expanding into these incredible landscapes and using much more water than the endemic vegetation uses, and thus really compromising our water resources. And for investments of only a few tens to hundreds of millions, we can increase water supply out of these catchments to a similar extent as is provided by an investment of billions of rands in something like the Berg River Dam. So again, here is a massive opportunity for understanding an entire ecosystem holistically, investments into job creation and into enhancing ecosystem services, all provided in the context of climate and climate change. Another big thing that we've learned here in the Western Cape, possibly better than almost anywhere else on the planet, is how it is possible to shift human behavior in response to climate risk. And this was something we learned in the lead up to the day zero crisis of a few years ago, where and we have a very good understanding now, put together by a lot of people in different research papers and various ways, of how it was possible to communicate and to find messages that people would respond to. And I think this is an incredible way that, it's an incredible thing that we can bring to the global community on how to respond and how to build a public awareness and a public response, which is voluntary and, well, partly voluntary, and but into which everybody buys. So I want to close with a final slide, which says that we really do know what to do. It's just that we don't know how to do it. And that's the trick. We know that at a global level, I'm showing you here a page from a fantastic website, which anybody can go to, actually. It's called En-ROADS, Energy Roads, En-ROADS. It's produced by MIT, one of our partners in the Global Alliance for Universities on Climate, and been produced over many, many years. And what this piece of software does is to project the emissions pathway for different responses, different policy responses, energy responses, responses in the transport sector, responses in land and industrial emissions. And you can go into this website and you can adjust various elements. This is at a global level. You can adjust carbon price, nuclear, various types of responses. And you can see in real time how this affects the future temperature of our planet. And we know that the way to reduce warming to below 2 degrees is to put a higher price on carbon, to radically change the transport system and increase energy efficiency in buildings, and to reduce emissions from agriculture. These put together, these things alone will keep us below 2 degrees. We don't have to touch population growth. We don't have to touch economic growth. All we have to do is incentivize the right things. But will we do it? That's a big question. How do we get that right? Thanks very much for listening.
Guy, thank you so much. I think from the change of your title right through, you've emphasized to us the urgency with which we have to act. And it reminded me of the famous quote of Greta Thunberg, who said, "I want you to feel the fear, and then I want you to act as if the house is on fire," because it is. In addition to that, you managed to highlight for us the complexities and often also the unintended consequences of what would seemingly be thought of as good ideas or simple solutions, and the need to rebalance. Also, the importance of a truly transdisciplinary approach and partnership approach. And also why African science in and for Africa is so critical in this area. So thank you very much. You have really managed to not give us an academic presentation, but has given us some wonderful food for thought, and certainly great encouragement and a sense of urgency in going forward with the school. So thank you very much for that. Another person who's been playing an absolutely critical role in the establishment of the school and has really been a great champion and an actor in the establishment of the school is Professor Eugene Klute, who is the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Research and Innovation and Postgraduate Studies at Stellenbosch University. And Eugene, without any further ado, I would like to give over to you.
Thank you very much, Jarina. Deputy Minister Buti Manamela, our DG for DSI, Phil Muyaga, Professor Wim de Villiers, and the honored guests. It really is my pleasure to also welcome you here at the launch of the School for Climate Studies at Stellenbosch University. As Professor de Villiers indicated, that we are a university that focuses on research, so we research intensive. We have a vision of becoming the leading research intensive university on the continent. And so as part of that vision, we identified a few years ago 5 areas of research that we will focus on. And you see them on the slide there: natural environment, health and human security, systems and technologies for the future, human creativity and social innovation, and social justice and development. We also use the analogy of skyscrapers and open areas, the city landscape analogy. It's actually Tarina's idea, a very good idea, where the skyscrapers are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary research programs that focus on these wicked type of problems that we face with climate change, as Professor Guy Midgley clearly pointed out to us. So we conceptualized the school about 18 months ago. We got together, about 35 of us in the field of climate studies, and we started with a business plan for the school. And then it took us the rest of the time, of course, to get the school established through all the systems that we have at the university. The school is unique in the sense that it has the same status as a faculty. It's a very strong school, a strong group of researchers. We have approximately 100 students at the master's and PhD level in the field of water, renewable energy, also in, of course, if we think about the legal framework in our Faculty of Laws, that participate as it is already in this very, very important field of study. So what we see today is the culmination of a lot of hard work of many, many people at this university, from our support services side, also then from our academic side, and with the support all the way from Professor Wim de Villiers and the rest of the rectorate. And I really appreciate the support that I've had over the past 18 months to actually get to the point where we are right now. I had a long discussion yesterday afternoon also with Guy on many issues, which is highlighted here, and others. But I do think the message that he shares with us here resonates, and I'd like to quote what James Martin says in his book with the title, The Meaning of the 21st Century, Vital Blueprint for Ensuring Our Future. And this is what he states, and I quote. He says, at the start of the 21st century, humankind finds itself on a non-sustainable course. A course that, unless it is changed, could lead to grand-scale catastrophes. At the same time, we are unlocking formidable new capabilities that could lead to more exciting lives and glorious civilizations. This could be either humanity's last century or the century that sets the world on a course towards a spectacular future. My wish and dream is that this School for Climate Studies will do exactly that, that we will build the future so that it does provide a spectacular future for those that follow. And now what I would like to do is invite you all to share with me and have a look at a very short video presentation, which will give you a visual of what the school is all about. Again, my sincere thank you for all of you that have joined this launch. I'm looking forward to be collaborating with you as we go into the future together, and enjoy the video. Thank you very much, Tarina.
Colleagues, it remains for me to greet you and to thank you for attending this wonderful launch. It's absolutely amazing to see more than 200 participants at this event, and I really enjoyed it, and we really look forward to working with you. Please allow me to just do a few acknowledgements and votes of thanks. Firstly, again, to the Honourable Deputy Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Mr. Buti Manamela, for your inspiring presentation. For the other speakers, Professor Wim de Villiers, Professor Guy Midgley, Professor Eugene Klute, for their inspirational contributions. And then also a very, very big thank you to my team in the Division for Research Development, Marijke Hunter-Husselman, Asima Gafoor, Whitney Prince, and Jennifer de Beer, without whom we would have had none of the visuals and the slides and the video, all these wonderful things that we've seen today. So thank you very much for your hard work. Thank you also to Mr. Leluma Matuane from the DSI for arrangements with the Minister and also colleagues in the Office of the Deputy Minister. To Jenny Frost for designing our booklet, and you're very welcome to go and have a look at the booklet and at the website as listed on this slide. And also I want to really thank all our academic researchers in the different departments and faculties that are part of this initiative.